We live in a world where people are more digitally connected than ever, yet many are experiencing deeper levels of isolation, nervous system dysregulation, and touch deprivation. What happens when something as simple as safe, platonic human touch becomes part of the healing process? Welcome back to the Practice Pulse, the podcast where we explore innovation, systems, and growth across health, wellness, and longevity. I'm your host, Nancy Margrit, founder of Optima Pro AI, where we help businesses scale smarter through practical AI systems, operational clarity, and scalable infrastructure while retaining the human touch. Today's conversation is one I've honestly been fascinated by since I first discovered this field even existed. Joining me today is Keeley Shoup, co-owner, and CEO for Cuddlist, a training organization and professional directory focused on therapeutic, platonic touch, and somatic care. Keeley has spent over a decade in private practice as a cuddle therapist and has become a major advocate for this intersection of somatic work, ethics, emotional regulation, and human connection. Her background is incredibly unique, and I think this conversation is going to actually challenge a lot of assumptions that people have around healing, loneliness, nervous system health, and what we, really see human connection and how it actually looks. So, Keeley, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And let's get started. Well, if you
Yeah,
don't mind,
absolutely.
tell us a little bit about your story. You have a really interesting background and how you kind of you grew into this role as a cuddle therapist and then beyond to expanding that to reach other people who may be interested in doing it as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, in some ways, the story goes back quite far. But even though it goes back quite far, I promise I will not be too long. But I didn't set out to be in the wellness space. I didn't set out to be in the psychotherapy, mental health world necessarily, but that's sort of always the trajectory that my life has been on. So my family was always in medical practices, including my mom starting from the time I was born as a NICU nurse. And our family tradition was to go in and hold the babies and cuddle them so that they had, as a volunteer, that was one of their best chances for survival to get additional touch. Then she switched from NICU to hospice care. And just like my family tradition had always been of going and volunteering, we went and volunteered. And whereas the other volunteers of my same age at that time, around high school age, were happily stocking shelves and in the background roles, I always had this passion for being with people at a time when it could have been the scariest, the loneliest, the most horrific part of some people's lives became the most meaningful, peaceful, a smooth transition to another way of being or an exit out of a way of being by the connection that I was able to provide. Just sitting next to someone holding their hand took them from terrified and alone to connected and at peace. Those were formidable experiences, and I always had this fascination on what was going on there, and I had always had a fascination with the human brain and with how we perceive the world and engage in the world. So I took college credit psychology courses when I was in high school because I was so fascinated. And that's not I never thought of it as a career thing back then. I was going to be in film and television. And like I got a film degree and my minors are in Japanese and French because I was like, I want to travel and I want to I want to make films. And blah. These were the things that I thought I was going to do with my career. But that through line has always been just the way of being in the world. And then when I came across what this kind of work is, that how I discovered that this work exists, this platonic somatic work, I came across it through workshops around boundaries and consent, which was the missing piece. And that's what launched me into this. I found out about how do we engage with each other as humans in a way that is really thoughtful, kind, and caring. And that opens up the door to be able to connect in a way, in this like nurturing physical way that felt so deeply ingrained in our humanity.
I think that's such a beautiful story, and I love that your mom took you to do those things as a child and really fostered that, not
Yeah.
only
Mhm.
that kind of direction for you, but also just that general caring of other individuals through those experiences. I think that's so important, and we undervalue parents who take the time to do those things with their children. So I love that. I love that part of your story. So for people hearing the term cuddlist or cuddle therapist for the first time, Keeley,
Mhm.
how do you typically explain what this work actually is and the role that it plays in the emotional and nervous system health?
Yeah, and that word can conjure up so many different mental images for very different people, and it's so indicative of where different people come from, the different, like, traditions or cultures or, like, their family structures that they come from. It really reflects a lot of different things. Some people hear that and think, "Oh," and some people hear that and think, "Ugh." Both of those reactions make so much sense to me. To explain a little bit about what it is. So, we are giving people access to nurturing, caring, platonic touch through the unseen part, which the unseen part is through boundaries and consent education. It doesn't even need to be formally named that in a session, but that's how we get there. That's how we arrive at the access to platonic touch for the purposes of improving their well-being. And that can show up in a billion different ways. So, from the most basic idea of someone who just happens to be in a place in life where they're a bit more isolated than what they want to be. That could be because they just moved to a new city where they don't know anyone and they're embarking on a very new adventure, whether it's for a job or for a change of scene or something, and they just haven't had the hours to put into building a whole new social structure. We realize as adults that's actually kind of hard to do, to just
Mhm.
uproot and then build a whole new friend circle. That does take some time. And so we're still needing those physiological benefits of human connection, human touch. There's a lot that is important in our bodies that goes along with our access to that. So, cuddling or being around people in a nurturing environment improves our immune system. It boosts our immune system. It lowers our blood. It increases our ability to feel connected, even in other spaces. So it's like that kind of awful catch 22. If I don't have access, I don't think I have access, and I don't, and the world becomes lonelier. Then when I do have access, the world opens up. It activates those parts of your brain. So there's a lot of physiological benefits to having access to nurturing touch. And that could be from isolation, like, like we mentioned, moving in a new space, or it could be from a recent relationship transition, whether a spouse has passed, or there's a breakup, or a divorce, or a loved one is gone. That can cause unwanted amounts of isolation. People might be going through grief or loss, and this is a really great way to have a structured place that has a different kind of a maintenance need, right? So, as someone who's going through loss of a loved one, I hear this all the time in my space. They're the rock for a lot of the other people who are also dealing with the grief of that earth-shattering thing in their life, right? They don't really have a whole lot of places they can fall apart, but the comfort of me being outside of that, like, social ecosystem means they've got a place where they can actually start to process their own grief, where they're not having to be the stability for other people. And then they can go back and they're actually more stable to support all those folks. So they're getting the support that they need in a way and in a place that feels safe enough to do. Because you kind of have to have a place that's safe enough to fall apart. And not everyone's like main home, if they're the support structure for people. There's tons of I also personally there's lots of applications to this work, but one of my specialties is working with people who are neurodivergent or working with people who are in the queer world, whether that's gender, sexuality, queerness. That can be isolating if for a lot of reasons, both of those experiences. So with neurodivergent folks, there's different kinds of sensory needs, right? And so how do you get access to structuring your touch, structuring your connection with other people in a way that feels accessible to you? And we get to customize that for them, and then they can recreate that in other places because there's not a lot of blueprints for those folks if their way that they engage in connection and in the world is unique. So, like, there's tons of applications for this, but the foundational piece is we get to learn how to not only we get to have us that you can experience it. And I say this very specifically, and thanks for bearing with me during all this long explanation, but it's a different thing, so we kinda have to go through some of the pieces of it.
Mhm.
It's not inherently, intuitive maybe, but we say access because it's certainly never required for anyone to touch in a session ever, because some people aren't ready for that, that's not what they want. I also have a lot of folks that I'm supporting who might have had different kinds of trauma in their background, and we're working up to that. And that's totally okay. Or different or just normalizing different people have different needs around that. Some people are super cuddly and love, like, their dream week would be every evening coming home and snuggling on the couch watching TV. Like, that's amazing. And some people are like, that sounds awful. I really like I get one really good hug a day, and then maybe on the weekends we're doing some snuggling. And really, that's all I need because I'm an active person and I like going, for long hikes. And like, those are the things I love to do, right? Everyone is actually okay to have their own level of need around that. And so we're also normalizing that. That's why we say access to platonic time.
Awesome. I think that's wonderful. And I love the way that you laid all of that out because I think it is important. And especially the piece about the neurodivergent individuals because that a lot of that is around
Yeah.
boundaries, right? So they have different boundaries for touch than even a typical, what you would call a typical person may have. However, really on every level we all have different boundaries for touch, so the fact that you really focus on that,
Uh-huh.
I think is the key to what makes this such a beautiful program in and of itself. One of the
That's
things
exactly
I
right.
did notice
Mm.
immediately when I first was doing some initial research on your Cuddlist program was, how quickly people jump to misconceptions because this is such a non-traditional field. So what are some of the biggest misunderstandings that people have about therapeutic touch and somatic care?
Well, and I'll make this even specific to the US because we've got some international folks, so they don't always have to deal with the same misconceptions. For instance, one of my colleagues in Germany doesn't have as much navigating of the idea that this work must be sexual in some way. There is no way that adults could engage in any kind of touch beyond a handshake that wasn't sexual. In Germany, she doesn't get that question. Because in the
Mm,
state, or maybe a misconception around touch that it's inherently sexual, which is so interesting to me, and there's lots of factors that go into why people have that idea, even though on its face, we can quickly, for everyone, really disprove that. Like, if touch isn't inherently sexual because you can hold babies, like, come on now. That's a little you can, kiss your grandma on the forehead. Right? Like, look, come on. We know that those things are very common, very platonic exchanges of just care. My dad has this really great story. He goes to we've got a bunch of family connections in Kenya, Nairobi in specific, and he goes over there for some business that he does as well. And sometimes in the different college campuses, the different institutes that he's going to for his work, the tour guide, who is also a man, will hold his hand like and take him around as a tour because that's just a very normal cultural commonplace thing. And for him being American, that was an adjustment. And it wasn't an unwelcome one. It wasn't a situation where he needed to set a boundary. It was just I was really not expecting that. And okay, great, this is fine. But it was a cultural norm shift for certain. But so that's one of the misconceptions that there has to be some sort of sexual implication going on if adults are going to be engaging in any kind of touch. And that's really a very largely American idea that could happen. And it's not largely true in any of my sessions. One common misconception, in addition to that, would be that, and it kind of breaks my heart to say, but that this is a sad thing to need or to offer. That in some way it indicates a level of, man, it's almost like or saying there's a moral failing in order for needing this. And those are some of the same echoed from just therapy in general in the 70s, right? Some of that same, like, well, I'm not broken enough to need that. And this is just support. It's just yet another, I put it to some of my mom friends. So I've got a bunch of mom friends in my, age group. And I say, do you ever just feel like you can't touch one more person? And they're like, yeah, all the time. I've got toddlers. Sometimes I'm just completely touched out. I'm like, yeah. But what if you laid your head in someone's lap and they stroked your hair like your mom used to do when you were a kid? And they're like, well, I would love that. Or I was like, what if someone brushed their hair like you did when you were like maybe in middle school and you were like talking with a friend and we were brushing and braiding each other's hair? They're like, no, I would adore that. That sounds amazing. Can I have that? Is that a thing I can have? I'm like, actually, yeah. That's all that this is. It's just a really great supportive place that you can have in addition to the other things. It's not shameful to need to go and get like your teeth cleaned. It's just one of those regular maintenance tasks, or it can be. It's something that is support to you.
I think that's
It's
beautiful.
one of the
I love the way
common ones.
you yeah, I love the way you laid that out because it's true. It's the perception around therapy has evolved over the last 30, 50 years. So it's like it's slowly evolved into where it's now more acceptable for people to go to therapy, and I think it's becoming more generally understood that everybody needs therapy. But I love that you've framed it like that because it's
Yeah.
true when
Yeah.
when you're introduced to something new, especially in the way our culture sits, because there are, many different customs and cultures elsewhere that don't sexualize all physical touch. So, I love the way you laid that out because I think that's a beautiful way to put it. And yes, I would absolutely love someone to brush my hair. That sounds just wonderful. So I think also, yeah, right. I think let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you're seeing right now, like just in society around isolation, touch deprivation, emotional disconnection, even the stigma around asking for comfort and support. Like, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing right now?
There is such an interesting conversation to be had around this, and it's so robust that we could have an entire series of podcast episodes on this. But a couple of the main themes that I'm seeing, some of it involve like gender specifics. So we do have an experience. So Lewis Thoreau met with a documentary about the manosphere and some of the so this is a conversation that's coming up. The Surgeon General has said that loneliness is an epidemic. We also have the surgence of the loneliness in that is so acute and constantly being written about in the places where there are tech booms. And so there's lots of different parts of our culture that feed into why more people at a higher and disproportionate rate are lonely right now. There's so many different factors. And I think that some of it can be, at least one facet of it can be sort of summarized inadequately because there's not enough nuance in the summary, right? But technology is wonderful for us. It is brilliant. There's so many cool things that are made possible by it that were never possible before. And also at the same time, it has evolved well past our human being innate ability to keep up with it. We still are hardwired for in-person interaction. We, as human mammal animals with skin cells and like the actual animal of us needs to be around other regulated nervous systems, needs to see the mirror neurons firing of another smiling face. The neuroscience is really clear about that.
Hmm.
We have science around us feeding off the electrical impulses in each other's skin. That is how our bodies are wired. We have not evolved out of those needs. So even though we have our social needs being met by how much we can connect through the phone, through our social media, through our conversations online, and that is fulfilling this lovely bit of intellectual connection. Our our bodies are still our hardwiring, right? They're our that's the analog machine that we're lugging around with that does not have all of that advancement. And so we still have to tend to it. We haven't evolved out of needing our water. We haven't evolved out of needing to eat food. Evolved out of exercise, and we haven't evolved out of needing physical connection, even though there are so many incredible things that we can do with the technology at hand. And it also means that we still only have the number of hours in the day that we have, where for eons, we were able to spend a lot of those hours of the day slow with other people in much slower contexts, doing communal activities or going on long solo walks in the woods to hunt. Like we have for hundreds and hundreds of years had a different kind of existence that our bodies is geared and wired for. And so we still have to maintain our bodies in a way that is more now intentional, where that was just contextually built in. We have to build that in. now. And this is one of those natural evolutions of like, okay, we can meet this moment. We can meet this moment by interesting innovation. This is one of those interesting innovations.
That's so true. I think that was a beautiful way to put it because it's true. Jonathan Haidt has a book called The Anxious Generation. So it goes into like the onset of, our children having digital devices at a young age and how that it's not just about they're spending time on their device and the device is doing something. It's also that the device is taking away from the time that they would have been spent playing with other children their age and taking risks together and doing things outside and having those physical interactions and social interactions with other children. So I think that was really well put in terms of this is really just an innovation that's being developed as a society to keep up with our now lack of touch as we've moved more towards a digital age and really were propelled there through the COVID epidemic. So I think that was a beautiful way to put it. So let's talk a little bit about an actual cuddle therapy session. For someone who's never experienced cuddle therapy before, what does a typical session actually look like?
I will give you the structure and it's very hard to describe what happens in it because it is so dependent on each individual person. No two
Hmm.
sessions look the same, but that doesn't mean that I can't give any kind of a picture. So traditionally, I'm seeing people in my studio space. And so the space that I welcome them in, depending on what we've decided we're working on, for some people, it's just routine self care. For some people, we're working on some relationship skill building. For some people, it's getting their deficit back to a good level of just like access. So we're the loneliness deficit, right? We're working on that. There's all kinds of reasons, right? So we decide what our reason in a consultation prior to, and then they arrive. There's a needs to get changed into comfier clothes if they're coming off of work or whatever. You can get into something like akin to I typically wear yoga pants and like a t-shirt or something, just something that's mobility friendly. If you're in a suit, that'll be a little bit harder to be comfy in. And then have a glass of water. And what doing to your neck? Like, just what's your body like? Did you also, what are your emotions like? Did you just see a wreck on the I-69 getting here? Like, that would be a little bit tough to come down off of, like, oof, just out of the traffic and the hustle and bustle of the day. Assess, like, how's your heart, how's your emotions in this moment? And then we often set an intention based on a lot of the goals that we're trying to get out of the time together. After we do that, we have what I lovingly call some people will resonate with this word, some people won't, so we can use different words, but like our opening ritual. And that opening ritual is we both say, and this is where it kind of differs from talk therapy, and we both have an agreement that we there of like, hey, I'm going to speak up if I'm ever uncomfortable, so you don't have to worry about mind reading for me. And you don't have to worry about whether or not I'm uncomfortable at any moment. I promise I'm going to be honest about that and I'll shift. And I expect the same from them. I have no magical insight into their body at any given moment that they don't have. Right. Like there are some ways in which some professions really have a different kind of expertise, a bit more prescriptive, meaning like if you go into a massage session, especially if it's like a massage or something, it's like, okay, I need to work this muscle to get it to perform in this way, and I will use these techniques on this like it's very prescriptive. This is what needs to happen. But in our space, we are figuring that out together because there's nothing that needs to happen beyond the goals that we set. And there's no information that I have about someone else's body more than what they have, because this is about preference and not about maybe muscle function, right? And so we have a little bit of conversation about that of like, I'm going to make sure I'm comfortable. I need you to also speak up if there's something that's just not feeling quite right. I need you to be really reliable to advocate for that for you. And so we have that conversation and then
Hmm.
we switch. And then there's whatever session is, it's really decided by what we discover together. For some people, it could be, man, I really have no idea. It's like, all right, so I feel like a lot of people could potentially relate to the experience of not even really being aware of their body because their brain is so on all the time. Noisy mind, or some people will call it their just, I have a friend who calls it her brain gremlins, which is just adorable. But their brain just doesn't shut off. It's just so noisy. And they're really just in their head a lot, right? Anxious. And so we work on like, cool, can you feel your feet on the ground? Can we start there? Like, just let's get some sensation awareness, right? that our body is online and we can actually be really attentive to it. Because the other weird thing, people will often ask a lot for like cuddle poses. If you can't feel your body, it's irrelevant the position that we're in. You're not gonna feel it anyway. So we could be in a pretzel. We could be laying together stiff as a board next to each other like sardine. Like, it really does not matter the physical position that our body is in if you can't feel your body. So sometimes that's where we start. And then we create an experience to be participants in creating the experience. And yeah, it looks so different for different people.
That's awesome. I think that was a great explanation. So definitely gives a better understanding. And I love that because we do get so lost that sometimes we lose track of like what is my body even doing. And so having those grounding exercises to start off so that people are really able to ground themselves before diving in and expanding on that is a beautiful way to start. So I'd love you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'd love for you to just kind of walk us through a little bit more the kind of the nervous system component of this. Like what changes do you see physically or emotionally in clients when they experience this safe, regulated platonic touch?
Oh, yeah. We are hardwired to co regulate. So, people who have experienced a lot of high anxiety will feel the experience of being actually at peace, actually relaxed. Some people will leave. When human beings touch skin to skin, specifically the type C nerve cells that are in our skin, then we produce oxytocin. Oxytocin has delightful physiological benefits, and it can kind of feel a little bit like at the end of cuddle session, they can feel a little floaty, or and your reaction times actually end up being a little bit slowed somewhat. And so I often will tell people at the end of a session to like have a nice glass of water before you leave, sit and take a couple of nice big deep breaths. And if you're driving anywhere, because your reaction times are going to be a little bit slower because your body and your nervous system is so relaxed. So people will feel that deep. I think it's not, if people have been in like sensory deprivation chambers, sometimes people report it being a little bit similar to that, not spot on, but kind of that really deep, like someone calls it like bone relaxation. Like it's all the way in my bones. I feel so calm and so comfortable. You also feel more connected, the ability to be vulnerable with someone and have that not trip the parts of your brain that would say, like, go into fight or flight from vulnerability, or say, this is unsafe. It is unsafe to be vulnerable. There's some people who will walk into a first session and say, I would genuinely rather run out of here screaming than be vulnerable at any moment. I'm like, got it. We do not have to. We can just connect. And by the end, they're telling me these really beautiful, sometimes hard stories. The end of the session, they've maybe had a teary moment, and the catharsis of that felt really good. But they find themselves surprised to have those experiences because their body was able to get to a place that it actually felt really safe to do so. It processed something in a healthy way. These are all, even though I'm describing like a teary moment as catharsis, those are really healthy things for our body to experience and then process through. So these are really wonderful impacts that they're having, including boosting the immune system, like I mentioned before. But it's not always how people experience if they've been in corporate environments a bunch, right? If they're on the go all the time, they're not slowing down often to get to this kind of relaxation place. So that's a lot to do with nervous system.
Okay, awesome. That was a beautiful explanation behind kind of some of the science really that goes into this. Um, so let's talk a little bit about your business and your role in your company. So you lead and help train other practitioners through Cuddlist. What standards, ethics, and boundaries are essential in creating a self environment for this type of work?
Yeah. So I have so much passion with my individual work, right, which is separate from my work as the Cuddlist CEO and director of training, right? So that I it is one of the biggest honors to be able to support other practitioners in their entrepreneur journey into this world. And some of our practices and ethics that we have for our members, there's the training that honestly anyone can get this training if they just want some different tools to apply to their life. If they want to get certified of the training and become a cuddlist, then there's some additional requirements, including like background check and things like that. But the foundational protocols, I guess, or the methodology starts with essentially three core elements. The first core elements, everyone adheres to the code of. If everyone goes through it, it has things like an agreed upon standard for hygiene. It has things like both people will be over 18, because in order to sign off on a waiver that says I am, accepting this service, you got to be 18 years old to sign those waivers. There's an agreed upon standard of clothing. There's agreed upon in order. I'm going to say some words that are kind of technical that also might give people some interesting reactions, but just bear with me because the word sexual means so many things to different people. I can then that could mean different. No saliva exchange. Like we actually do spell it out in very clear terms so that there's no confusion, not to make anyone uncomfortable, but to be as clear as humanly possible. So the code of
Mhm.
conduct is really there, and it has really great establishes a standard for everyone. The other two elements, the first one is that kind of I mentioned the opening ritual. That happens every single session, whether I've seen someone once or a million times. And that is because we're both entering into an agreement, and the agreement is explicitly stated. And it's I'm going to it's weird a little bit, because when we think of a service industry, a lot of time we have these phrases like the customer is always right, or top customer service, or like are you like, and that's we're sort of turning that on its head, because in order for this experience to, one, feel good and not fake and not weird and performative, I actually have to be a real person. And I got to tell you, no, I'm not comfortable doing something, even if it's within the code of conduct. And you say, well, it was something people can easily visualize. And if I'm like, actually, no, I don't think I want that right now. Can we do something else? That I'm actually being a real person. And I'm not just acquiescing to a service just because you want
Mhm.
it. We're connecting. It's genuine. You have to genuinely connect. Otherwise, this doesn't feel good and it defeats the whole purpose of connection. Right. And so that opening agreement is always required. And then the last piece is that it's client led, meaning I am not going to prescribe the things that we must do. Won't go from this cuddle pose to this cuddle pose to this cuddle pose, and then you need to make sure that you like all those things. That's not what's going to happen. It has to be something that we create together that you actually want. And sometimes the work starts with figuring that out and giving space and time and some structure around, and maybe some exercises around figuring out, is how you want to connect, sitting side by side and holding hands? Or do you want to stand and hug? Or do you just want to like lean against my shoulder with your shoulder sitting next to each other? Or do we want to lay down and spoon? All of these things have very different feelings for different people, have different associations for different people. Not one of them will feel the same. And so we've got to actually figure out what the client is comfortable. And so it's client led in that way. We're not telling you, okay, now you need to do this thing and now you need to do this thing. We're not ever doing that. So those are the three basics of the methodology. And then in our deep into them, as well as making sure people have some training around trauma awareness. They've got some training around cultural competency. There's all different kinds of people in the world. And if we're seeing all different kinds of clients, it's our office and our door, and how am I going to make sure that I am reaching this person and having enough empathy for their lived experience to know how I can be support. Because if I really know nothing about this person's lived experience, it's going to be really hard for me to support them. If I don't know anything about what it's like to have any kind of a physical disability, then I might never mention that, oh, I'm on the third story of a walk up office building, and never mention that, right? So someone who's coming there with mobility challenge might be like, okay, well, we didn't have any discussion of this. So we have those things built into the training as well.
Mhm. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that it's great that you have standardized the things that are important, right? And I know it has to be very custom to the individual, but you do have to have those standard processes and procedures so that you really make sure that people are getting a quality experience when they come see one of your cuddlists. So you've now we're going to shift and talk a little bit about the business side. So you've now spent several years not only practicing this work but also helping scale a platform and training an organization around it. What has been harder than expected about building a business in such a misunderstood category? Or not even misunderstood, but unknown?
No, yeah. I love this question because it sparked so much of the innovation in the whole of my company and how we're really, and I say this word with affection and with a lot of admiration for how we run things, we're really weird. We run our company in a very unique way because, yeah, the innovation needed to be there. And so I would say some of the most difficult things were how do you educate the masses on a thing that we know, we being the practitioners and we being people who also receive the service on a regular basis and understand what it is. We know that everybody needs this. Everyone in our lives needs this, and we know that the person then understands it, which is hard to do because it's brand new. But once we explain it in a way that a person can then understand it, everyone's like, "Well, yeah, I want that thing." That's great. This is. So that's a big one. And then scalability is also been a challenge. But it also means that when I say we run things weird, the traditional sort of capitalist models out there never fit well for us. So we operate quite outside of a traditional capitalist model in many, many ways. Structure of our company and how we run with the employees in it. And to be clear, the cuddlists are not employees; they're running their own private practices.
Right.
It's a little bit more maybe an analogy is like psychology today doesn't employ the therapist it lists,
Mhm.
right? That can be an analogy to help people understand. But the trying to reinvent a little bit of the wheel, like how even should like what CRM do we use? Well, we don't have a lot of other people doing the exact same thing that we're doing, so there's not a whole lot, or even just the languaging around what traditional capitalism uses, or traditional even like corporate culture. Like, who are your competitors? Don't really have competitors out there. Also, philosophically, even the companies that are doing something simple or similar, excuse me, to what we're doing, either they're my colleagues and we're collaborating. We're not ever competing, we're sharing clients. So it doesn't fit the model of competitor because I'm constantly sending people over to them and they're constantly sending people to me. And so treating them as a competitor would really actually be detrimental to my business in very active ways.
Mhm.
And then anyone else is not really doing the same thing. And so it's so hard to use some of these the traditional like business model language to apply to us because it doesn't fit. It ends up being kind of detrimental, and we've gone down some wrong paths a couple times over the 10 years that this company has been um, trying to models since we've been incorporated, and we quickly realize, okay, that's not a thing that we can adopt. So we got to make our own.
I think that's great. I think you put that very well because this is such a unique it's a unique program, a unique, training system that you kind of have set up here to get people to understand how being a cuddlist works and what comes into play with all of that. And I love that you have that more collaborative approach. I think even businesses in what you would call like a traditional, capitalist organization, I think we all need to be a little more have a little more abundance mentality because the more we help each other, it's not there's plenty to go around. So just because I'm not a good fit for someone doesn't mean, a colleague of mine or someone who does something similar might not be a good fit. And I'm always happy to refer people. So I love that you take that approach because it is unique and you're seeing it more, I feel like, in recent years, but you still don't see it very often. So let's
Hmm.
talk a little bit
Hmm.
about just the general awareness. So, as awareness around the nervous system regulation and somatic healing and loneliness continues to grow, where do you see this field evolving over the next few years? Like, what's the future look like in this field and for even for Cuddlist?
Hmm. I would love to see it, and it's already getting there. Like, people in the mental health space know that some of the, like, hottest topics right now are, like, polyvagal theory, and there's, like, all kinds of Gabor Mate does wonderful stuff around how incorporating more somatic, and for anyone who's not terribly familiar, somatic simply just means body, right? Like, incorporating more, and people will often call it like the mind body connection. That's really common out there. Just talking about how we've a little bit done ourselves a disservice traditionally by cordoning off mental health to be a little bit so compartmentalized as just like, okay, neuroscience and Freud and Jung and like having it be so compartmentalized, we're noticing that it's too interconnected to be cordoned off in that way. There's a lot of buzz right now about gut health and how gut health is actually significantly impacting the results of people's like depression and anxiety assessments. And the gut biome is also another big buzzword, right? Like, and just from that tiny microcosm of the interconnectivity of this, like we're all one organism. The mind isn't like in a jar separate from our body. It's a part of it. And so knowing that all of to just say we're only going to talk about a thing and that's how we're going to fix your feelings about it is so trying to run a race with your like leg tied behind your back, or I'm mixing a bunch of metaphors, but like it's so limiting for what possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my references were for a minute, but yeah. Yeah. And so I see us in terms of plugging into the broader picture of finding a really great slot in collaboration with people's mental health providers. I often work in what's called triadic model. So my clients will sign what's called an ROI, or a release of information. They'll sign that for their therapist, their talk therapist as well. We'll have a plan that we came up with all together so that we're all on the same page. It's like, what if all of your doctors talk to each other? What kind of bigger, more complete, and this is another buzzword, holistic picture could you get if your uh, ear, nose, and throat person also talked to your optometrist, also talked to your, like, what would happen if there was a big, full, complete picture? And I think that we're at least what I know my company does is it tries to be an advocate for exactly that thing. It tries to be an advocate for as many of your other professionals as you want to bring to as a team. We would love to make sure that we are getting the full and complete picture of you so that we're actually helping you in the ways that are going to be most effective for you. And we couldn't possibly learn all the different parts of you fast enough. I couldn't possibly get a, medical degree in all these different areas fast enough to be relevant to you. So I'm going to take care of my piece and communicate with the team. So that's where I hope we slot in.
I think that's great. I agree, and I know it's a buzzword, but a holistic approach where we're jumping in and really communicating between these different areas of expertise that are helping individuals. Because if you look at a business, you would never see a corporation running where each individual department doesn't talk to one another or communicate with what's going on in order to meet an outcome. You can't operate in that siloed environment without communication and coordination. So I commend you for that. I think it's amazing that you're reaching out to the other people in your clients' lives so that they're able to come together and you're really able to help this individual even on a whole higher level. That's awesome.
Because there's limitations. There's
Yeah.
limitations to what I can do, right? And I don't wanna scope, that's irresponsible, right? And so what happens in our session can look similar. We are talking about things, so that can look kind of similar to talk therapy, but no cuddle therapist trained in psychotherapy unless they did that separately. That's not inherent in the Cuddlist training, and it's not a requirement
Mhm.
for to take Cuddlist training. And so for me, I there's no way I can diagnose or treat mental illness. That has to be taken by someone who's got the training in those things. I can support the connection between you, your heart, and your that connection, that full picture, and with other people. We're really nurturing the relationships. Now, relationships between you and your body, relationships between you and other people, that's really where my profession comes in. And if someone starts having challenges that are outside of that scope, it is irresponsible for me to try to take care of it in or support them in those ways in my session, right? And so that has to but it also feels terrible to say like, "Not my job, but my pay grade," and I don't have to do that in this model, right? I can say, "I think this is so, so important. This piece of the puzzle is an incredibly important piece, and this piece is going to belong over in this area with that person so that they can have the right tools to support you in it. And what we can do here is this, right? And they'll interact. But over in that space, they're going to be giving you the support you need around that other part of this. And it's like I'm not going to tell people what they need to do for their heart health. Like I don't know, eat a box of raisin bran. I don't know. Yeah.
I think that that's very well put. So I appreciate that you bring in other individuals. So before we head into the lightning round and then close out, I've got one last question, or if you I'm just if you could just share with us, without names, obviously keeping everything confidential, just a general story maybe about a client experience and like what benefits or outcomes that they saw from undergoing some cuddle therapy.
Yeah. There's so many, and I love so I'm gonna talk very generically about some common even outcomes. So I love working with
Okay.
someone up until they get in a relationship. They, like, graduate from our sessions to, like, "Oh, I'm going on these dates, and, she agreed to be my girlfriend, or he agreed to be my boyfriend," and I'm like, "Awesome. Call me when you need me again, or call me when you need advice." So that's a lovely, like, kind of graduation moment. So I also work with couples, and that work is kind of cool and unique because sometimes people will have differing needs around touch, and so what we work on is making sure one person has like, isn't in that they have a shared language around how do we navigate these conversations? How do we talk about this? How do we engage in a way that feels good for both of us that and we don't have expectations on each other? We're not expecting each other to mind read, like, we can work on that. When they say like, "We were at home and we had this really cool conversation and then this happened. It was exactly what I wanted and it was exactly what they wanted and it was lovely." Like, I love those, like, moments. I've had people get raises in their jobs because they had we worked on different either communication talking to their team or their bosses, or they were more relaxed and calm at work, so they weren't so anxious, and so their production got better, their output got better. Those are very fun. And then one of the really, really touching ones is people who are really isolated, finding more connection in their world that they didn't realize was already there. So, "Oh, yeah, well, that
Mm.
person that I've talked to a couple times, it was just too scary, the idea of inviting them over to, like, snuggle and watch scary movies," or whatever it was for them, like, and then they
Mhm.
asked a friend, "Would you be interested in that?" And the friend was like, "Actually, that sounds lovely, it's something I also do." Not that their relationship changed in any way from a friendship, it was just something they got to add to existing friendships and existing or the people who do that with their family members and didn't realize that, like, their parent just didn't know how to broach it. It was never something that their parent learned from their own parents. And so when a kid's like, "Would you like to share in a hug?" Like an actual like a hug that lasts 2 breaths. Sometimes we count hugs in the amount of breaths because you can do the little, like, pat, pat, release, or you can say, "I kinda just wanna hug you for a full" and sink
Yeah.
into it. And sometimes that's a change. It's like, "I actually want this one to be big. Can we have a big one?" And the other person know how to ask. That sounds lovely. Those moments are really, really huge.
Awesome. Those are beautiful stories, and I love how different they are because I never occurred to me that it could affect your work life, but I can see where, when you're doing that nervous system regulation, that does affect you in all aspects of your life. Okay, so let's jump into the lightning round. So these are just quick, short answers, and we'll just roll through these and then we'll close out. So, what is one myth about therapeutic touch or cuddle therapy that you'd love to eliminate forever?
I'd love to eliminate the idea that it is sad or that someone has to be like broken in order to seek it out.
Great. What is one habit or mindset that helps you stay grounded personally? Awesome. That's a good one. That's been coming up a lot lately. Okay, what gives you hope right now for the future of mental health and human connection?
Every single one of my clients. I get paid to love people well, and I see them absolutely bloom. I am so convinced. I In the world, I lose my faith in humanity. In my sessions, I regain it.
Well, that's beautiful. You need a t-shirt that says that. All
Yeah.
right, the last one is where can people learn more about you and connect with your work?
Yeah, I've got some of an online presence. So if you go to TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, kind of all those places and type in your cuddle therapist, then you can find me. You can also find me at keeleyshoup.com, KeeleyShoup, keeleyshoup.com. That's my personal website. And then Cuddlist. If you type in Cuddl, the places are going to try to autocorrect it to Cuddliest, as in with an E at the end. But it's like a violinist, right? Someone skilled in the art
Mhm.
of cuddling. And
Uh,
so a Cuddlist is also a great place to find me or find other folks.
Perfect. We'll include those links in the show notes. Keely, this was such a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate the work that you're doing and bringing more awareness to the safety and the ethics and humanity that you're bringing into the world, and really how this can affect someone on such a deeper level because our bodies are connected. It's shouldn't just be mental health. Mental health is connected in other ways, and the more people like you are out there talking about it, the faster we're going to understand those things and really be able to help more people. So I appreciate you taking this conversation on the multiple stages that you've taken it on, and really being out there and helping people and loving them well, as you say, which I think is awesome. I think this episode is going to really open a lot of people's minds to the reality that emotional wellness isn't just cognitive; it's embodied. And sometimes the simplest human experiences can have the deepest impact, and that's what you're doing. So thank you again for being here with us. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to hear more about innovative practices in the health, wellness, and longevity space, please like and subscribe and share this with someone who you think might benefit from it. Please definitely check out Keely and all of the work that she's doing. She's got some beautiful stuff going on. So thanks again for joining the Practice Pulse. Remember, innovation creates possibility, implementation turns it into growth. We'll see you next time.